Hello again, my friend. It's the Range Ronin. Today, I am going to take you through the steps necessary to properly maintain the Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun. I will, however, be using the Mossberg Tactical 20-gauge shotgun for this presentation, although the procedures for safety checking, disassembly, cleaning, inspecting, lubricating, assembly, and function checking applies to any Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun, regardless if one is a hunting shotgun or one used for protecting oneself or the castle. So, let's get on with the presentation. There is an old saying, beware the man who owns only one gun, because he knows how to use it. It can also be said that he knows how to maintain it. A pump shotgun, while appearing to be a simple device, has many complex operations to perform, aside from going bang when the trigger is pulled. The act of pulling the pump handle to the rear to extract and eject a spent shell, while preparing to chamber the next shell, and pushing it forward to chamber that shell, sets up an orchestration of moving parts that must work smoothly and in concert with each other. Proper maintenance is what mitigates problems related to the internal operation of components. Short stroking is an operator problem and is beyond the scope of this review. Removing and installing the internals of the pump shotgun can be a challenge and somewhat intimidating, and many shotgun owners simply will not go through that exercise. I must admit that I do not look forward to tearing down and assembling a pump shotgun, but I know that if I don't, I could encounter problems with the shotgun when I need it most. So, I am going to take you through the recommended procedures for properly disassembling, inspecting, lubricating, assembling, and function checking the Mossberg 500 series of pump shotguns, which will be aided by plenty of photographs, video, and illustrations. As far as tools, you will need a 3/16 inch punch and small hammer. These will be used when we get to removing and installing the trigger assembly. First, I'm going to start with a safety check to ensure that the shotgun is empty and safe to work on. Move the safety button down to the on safe position, and visually and physically check the chamber, elevator, and magazine tube to be certain that the shotgun is unloaded before disassembling the firearm. Now that the shotgun is empty and safe, the disassembly process begins. Here I'm going to insert a caution. Wear eye protection during disassembly and cleaning to protect your eyes from oil splatter or spring-loaded components. There are 3 steps involved with disassembling the shotgun. First is barrel removal, the second is trigger housing removal, and the third is disassembly of internal receiver components. So let's get started with removing the barrel. To remove the barrel, press the action lock lever and open the action by sliding the forearm fully to the rear. Move the forearm slowly forward until the front of the bolt is in the middle of the ejection port. Loosen the takedown screw by turning it counterclockwise until the screw threads are completely disengaged from the end of the magazine tube. Remove the barrel from the receiver with a gentle back and forth rotational movement while pulling the barrel out of the receiver assembly. To remove the trigger housing assembly, first position the shotgun on a clean surface with the trigger guard upward. With the punch, no greater than 3/16 inch in diameter, push out the small diameter trigger housing retainer pin located on the side of the receiver, approximately 1/2 inch below the rear of the trigger guard. Remove the trigger housing assembly by lifting the rear portion upward first. Note that the trigger housing assembly is a complex assembly and must not be disassembled. Disassembly should only be performed at an authorized product service center or by a qualified gunsmith. And for a word of caution, do not pull the trigger and allow the hammer to fall when the trigger housing assembly is removed from the receiver. To do so may result in personal injury and/or damage to the assembly. To disassemble the internal receiver components, first, pay special attention to the position of the bolt slide, and action slide bar assembly during this portion of the disassembly, as the parts must be in the same relationship during assembly. Start the disassembly by removing the cartridge interrupter and cartridge stop from the receiver. It may be necessary to tap the sides of the receiver lightly to release these parts. Move the forearm action slide assembly rearward so that the bolt assembly and bolt slide are 3/4 of the way to the rear. When the bottom of the bolt slide is aligned with the clearance cuts in the side of the receiver, lift the bolt slide upward and out of the receiver. Remove the bolt assembly by sliding it forward and out of the receiver assembly through the barrel opening at the front of the receiver. Note that with this next step, the safety button must be fully to the rear in the on-safe position to remove the elevator assembly. Pivot the front portion of the elevator upward out of the receiver. Squeeze the two arms which form the open end of the elevator assembly together sufficiently to disengage and remove the elevator from the receiver. Remove the forearm action slide assembly by sliding it forward and off of the magazine tube. Field disassembly is now complete. The shotgun should not be disassembled further for routine cleaning or maintenance. Further disassembly should only be performed by an authorized product service center or by a qualified gunsmith. Normal use requires only that the mechanisms be free of excessive shooting residue. Very little lubrication other than a light oiling of internal and external surfaces to prevent rust is all that is needed. To ensure optimum performance, Mossberg recommends thorough cleaning of the firearm after every 200 shot shells. However, unusually dusty, dirty, or harsh weather conditions or use of ammunition that leaves significant powder residue may require more frequent cleaning. If the firearm is to be stored for a long period of time, it should be thoroughly cleaned and oiled. Do not plug the barrel or store in a fabric-lined case that will absorb lubricant from the firearm, as this may result in corrosion to the unprotected metal surfaces. Over-lubrication should be avoided during below-freezing conditions. Many lubricants thicken in low temperatures. That could affect the operation of the firearm. Exposure to unfavorable weather or moisture from condensation requires additional care to prevent corrosion to the firearm. Scrub the bore and chamber with solvent and follow with cleaning patches until the barrel is clean. A final pass with a lightly oiled patch will provide a protective coating. A stiff brass bristle brush is useful for removing stubborn deposits. Be sure not to leave cleaning patches or excessive oil or grease in the bore, as they can create dangerous obstructions. Obstructions of any kind can cause damage to the firearm and could cause serious injury or death to you or those around you. Clean all components of the action, including the bolt slide, and action slide bars, to remove accumulated residue. An evaporating solvent should be used. Action parts will remain cleaner longer if lubrication is used sparingly. Clean the inside of the receiver with a rag or soft brush, giving special attention to the tracks which guide the bolt and bolt slide. Place a few drops of light oil in these tracks when clean. Care should be taken when cleaning the exterior surfaces of the receiver to prevent cosmetic damage. Never use a brush with metal bristles, as this could remove the protective coating on the receiver. Brush loose residue from the trigger housing with a soft bristle brush. Never use a brush with metal bristles, as this could remove the protective coating on the trigger housing. Now that everything is properly cleaned and lubricated, let's assemble the shotgun. There are 3 steps involved with assembling the shotgun: installing the internal receiver components, that also includes the forearm assembly, installing the trigger housing assembly, and installing the barrel. Place the receiver on a clean surface. Check to be certain that the safety button on the top rear of the receiver is fully in the on safe position. Slide the forearm assembly onto the magazine tube while guiding the action slide bars into the corresponding cuts in the front of the receiver. Assemble the elevator by squeezing the arms together sufficiently to position them in the receiver so that the studs on the elevator fit into the corresponding holes in the receiver. Pivot the elevator so that the forward portion of the elevator is even with the outside edge of the cavity in the receiver. Insert the rear of the bolt assembly with its bolt lock downward toward the front inside top of the receiver into the barrel opening of the receiver. Position the action bars so that the notch on the bar is even with the cuts on the inside receiver walls. Push the elevator down until it rests against the bolt. Position the rear of the bolt assembly even with the rear of the clearance cuts on the side of the receiver. Note that the bolt slide should be positioned with the slotted side facing up with the notch to the rear. Assemble the bolt slide, lowering the front of the bolt slide first. The bolt slide protrusion fits into the corresponding cut on the bottom of the bolt lock, while the two protrusions on each side of the bolt slide fit into each action slide bar slot. Position the cartridge stop and cartridge interrupter in their proper places on the inside walls of the receiver. Note that on left-handed models, the positions of the cartridge stop and cartridge interrupter remain in the same as shown, but the ejection port is on the opposite side. The hooks must face inward toward the center of the cavity away from the receiver walls. I use a small dab of grease on the surface of the cartridge stop and cartridge interrupter, which helps to hold them into the receiver while I install the trigger housing assembly. Note that the hammer must be in the fully cocked position to allow the trigger housing to be inserted into the receiver. Hold the cartridge stop and cartridge interrupter in place firmly against the receiver walls with one hand and grasp the trigger housing assembly with the other. Insert the lugs on each side of the front corner of the trigger housing into the slots on each side of the receiver. Then, ease the rear of the housing assembly down and into position. Do not force this. Align the trigger pin hole in the housing assembly with that in the receiver. Insert the trigger housing pin and push in fully until flush with the side of the receiver. A slight tapping with a small mallet might assist you in doing this. Note that if the trigger housing does not fit into place easily, check that all internal trigger housing pins are flush with the side of the housing, and that the cartridge interrupter and cartridge stop are positioned properly. Press the action lever and move the forearm rearward until the front of the bolt is in the middle of the ejection port. Slide the barrel takedown mount ring over the magazine tube while guiding the barrel into the receiver. Gently rotate the barrel back and forth while pushing the barrel into the receiver. Slide the barrel into the receiver and tighten the magazine cap, finger tight only. Do not use pliers or a wrench to tighten the magazine cap. Check to be certain that the barrel is fully seated into the receiver by looking through the ejection port. The barrel extension must rest firmly against the corresponding cut in the top of the receiver. After performing any work on the firearm, such as cleaning, disassembly, or installation of any accessory, check the firearm for proper functioning before firing any live ammunition. Move the safety button fully to the rear, to the on-safe position, and keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Open the action. Visually and physically check chamber, elevator, and magazine tube to be certain that the firearm is unloaded. Note that I use snap caps to provide buffering for the firing pin and to check for proper loading, extraction, and ejection. The use of snap caps, I totally leave up to you. For me, I install 2 snap caps in the loading tube with the action fully forward. Depress and hold the action lock lever. Open and close the action to check for free movement of the action assembly. Leave the safety button in the on-safe position. Pull the trigger to the rear fully. The hammer should not fall. Remove your finger from the trigger. Move the safety button to the off fire position. The hammer should not fall. Leave the safety button in the off fire position. Pull the trigger fully to the rear. The hammer should fall. Open the action by moving the forearm fully to the rear. Move the safety button fully to the rear to the on-safe position. The first snap cap, if you used one, should be extracted and ejected. Chamber the remaining snap cap. Pull the trigger. The hammer should not fall. Move the safety button to the off fire position. Pull the trigger. The hammer should fall. Cycle the slide one more time to extract and eject the remaining snap cap. This completes the function check. If the firearm does not perform as described in any of the aforementioned steps, contact the Factory Authorized Product Service Center immediately. Do not attempt to use the firearm. Well, my friend, I have come to the end of another chapter in the Range Ronin Chronicles. I would be honored to have you with me again for my other firearm and gear reviews, and wish it to be soon. Until that time, stay safe out there.